Good afternoon, and welcome to this segment of Texas Businessman Meets Germany. Recently, I bought a used car for my son after he had phoned me and gave me the details on the price in the car. We consummated this entire transaction in less than 4 hours. The car title was signed over and notarized using the bank's notary. The cashier's check was drawn and handed over at the same bank. A phone call to the insurance company secured the insurance while the car was registered at the local DMV where we purchased the license plates. Having lived and worked in Europe, South America, and Asia, I can safely say there is no other country in the world where this process can occur in less than a day. This is not to tout the greatness of America, but rather to point out that business is conducted at much different paces all over the world. Patience is probably the #1 piece of advice when transacting international deals. I once had an international executive who told me that the real ratio to think about when transacting business across the globe is whatever takes 1 minute in the United States will take 10 minutes in Europe and 100 minutes in Asia. Or even putting it in a little different frame of reference, if a business transaction will take 1 day in the United States, it will take 10 days in Europe and 100 days in Asia. Now, this may not be totally true today as businesses and countries are getting more and more efficient. Business in the USA, though, is characterized by speed, trying to keep the steps simple, completing the transaction. We're all about price, very sensitive, no loyalty at all. We have no need for pomp and circumstance. We're very casual about what we do and don't want a lot of details. Let the lawyers unravel it later if we have a dispute. A lot of the sources of business etiquette and where I will use some of the information from is from executiveplanet.com, quintessential.co.uk, Cyberlink, and globaledge.msu.edu. These are great sources of information on business etiquette. Observe in the following video and list for yourself the different cultural mistakes. See how many you can find when the Texan meets Germany.
How y'all doing today? Here's my business card, James T. Rollins, but call me Bubba. All my friends call me Bubba. Danke, Mr. James. And let me give you my card. Welcome to our company. You have a beautiful building here. Nice firm. We're looking forward to doing business with you. Your company's just tip-top. Yes, Herr Rollins, we must get to the agenda. I was able to call my family when I got out of the airplane. Do you have family here? Tell me about your family. Herr Rollins, yes, I have family, but let's get to our agenda we agreed upon by email. Well, before we get started, I'd sure like something to drink. I sort of half expected you would have some beer here. You know, it's probably not like back home, but maybe tonight we could go out to dinner together and I could taste some of that German beer and compare it. But meanwhile, I'd like to have some coffee, please. Yeah, we have some fresh coffee here if you would like. But we must begin the agenda soon. We are wasting time. Well, let's get started now. But before we do, I really think we should change a few things on that agenda. That agenda you sent me, we're going to need to have a little more flexibility on that agenda. So if we could just maybe change a few of these things and move them. You know, number 2, I'd like to kind of cover that first, if that would be okay with you, and maybe, you know, a little more flexibility, and we'll see if we can get done, you know, in the next couple of hours. But I need you to change a few of these things, as I'd like to make some points to you. Ja, Herr Rollins, we begin the appointment.
What did you observe? That he arrived late? Did you notice that he showed the sole of his shoe while he was sitting there waiting in the lounge? Or did you notice that his business attire was not appropriate? Did you notice also that he violated the hierarchical boundaries by walking into the conference room first and then sitting at the head of the table? Also, there was a casual business card exchange, and when he received the German's business card in return, he did not even take some time to read it. There was informal talk and kidding at the start of the meeting, discussing personal information like family, and he started to do some complimenting about the firm and the country. And then he started to go into comparing to things back home. He invited himself to dinner that night, and to top it all off, he sits there and tries to change the agenda. Anthropologists list the toughest things to cope with in a foreign land, and second only to language is the way we deal with time. Germans are serious about business, arriving on time and beginning promptly as expected. The German system is a monochronic time system, similar to the U.S., where items are done one at a time and appointments are required. Mid-morning or mid-afternoon is normal, but never on Friday afternoon. Formal attire is expected in Germany, and the U.S. is very informal in its business attire, and the world is much more formal. In Germany, expectation is of dark suits. The hierarchical boundaries are that you would expect in going into a conference meeting room that the host would lead the way and the guests should follow. The managing director would sit at the head of the table. You have your first opportunity to greet with a firm handshake and with eye contact and by reading carefully the business card. You know, Americans begin most of their meetings with kidding and then they get serious about the business. Germans do the opposite. They begin very serious and then they will celebrate after hours with you. Family is a very private time in Germany. There's no discussion about family with strangers. Home time is jealously guarded. It is rare to have home invitations. There's a strong dividing line between work and personal. Friendships with foreigners are formed slowly and with trust. Germans are suspicious of compliments. They're trying to figure out what are you trying to get. They expect quality work and no compliments are necessary. Whenever you catch yourself kind of saying back home or thinking back home, don't do it. Stop. Never compare to back home in any country, but specifically in Germany in areas of their festivities and their beer and their Autobahn and their quality. These are areas that they're very proud of. Never should compare to back home. Business dining is very different in Europe. And specifically in Germany, there are no breakfast meetings, and occasionally maybe at dinner you might be invited out, but normally business meetings are conducted at lunch. Never change the agenda. Germans keep strictly to an agenda, and last-minute changes are not welcome. You know, we saw in the first 5 minutes of this Texan meeting the German some cultural errors. He arrived late. He arrived with informal business attire. He violated hierarchical boundaries. He had a very casual business card exchange. There was informal talk or kidding at the beginning and discussing of personal information like family. And he was complimenting too much, comparing things to back home. And he invited himself to dinner that night. And of course, he tried to change the agenda. The first impressions that you give your host are the lasting ones. Study and know your host and country prior to arrival. Take on a learning attitude and appreciate the differences in culture. You should adjust to their culture. The Texan meets Germany, with my apologies to all my Texas friends. But unfortunately, many countries view the USA as cowboys. Most of this comes from my personal experience, but some came from the websites mentioned at the start of this video. This video was in partial fulfillment for my doctoral class, BS-NS 7851, at Anderson University with Dr. Emmett Delaney in 2012.